Was it Yom Tov?
Baruch Hashem was very nice. Nahum went with Muli. They got 38 patients in the hospital.
Ah, across the street. Yeah, I have a.
Amen. Where I tried to.
We're on 47.
Let me see where I was. I don't think I'm in 47.
Mayed.
Okay. Left it in 39.
Okay, we're going to start Tanur Rabbanan. It's the top of page 47a. It says, Kivsei Atzeres. We're learning about the sheep, the two sheep that are brought together with the 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos. That's Atzeres. It says, Ein mekachen es alechem ala b'shchita. They sanctify the bread when they're slaughtered. Now, sometimes the Karban Mincha could be sanctified because it's put into a vessel or something. These are sanctified with the slaughtering of the sheep. Ketzad. How does this work? So it says, Shachtan Lishman, if they were slaughtered for the right intention. What's the right intention? For the proper sacrifice. They're Karban Shlamim that are meant to be brought together with the 2 breads. V'zarak daman lishman, and the blood was also sprinkled for the right intention. Kadesh alechem, the bread becomes sanctified. Everything was done correctly. This it doesn't have to tell me.
Oh, man. Sukkah's not proving.
You know where it's plugged in?
I believe it's on a timer.
We can maybe take it off of the timer.
Which lights went off?
Car? Anyone's car? Okay, so it's working. So
It
cut it.
doesn't work still.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
You sure? It's not too low for you?
All right. We can see. You probably want to sit on this side.
You come sit here too.
So the bread becomes sanctified. Shachtan shlei lishman. Let's say it was slaughtered for the wrong intention. V'zarak daman shlei lishman, and the blood was sprinkled for the wrong intention. So this is totally. Not good. Everything was done for the wrong intention. So like Kadesh Alechem, the bread doesn't become sanctified. Shita Mekabetzis asks, how do you know, or from where do we know rather, that if it's slaughtered for the wrong intention, that it messes it up, that the bread doesn't become sanctified? See, the wrong intention is not pigul, it's not puzzle. It's the wrong intention. It was slaughtered for a different sacrifice. Those sacrifices are kosher. They're just not.
We went through this. We had a couple blot about this
Yeah.
earlier.
Yeah. So, but he says that we know it from the Karban Taida, I believe. He says that the bread doesn't become sanctified if it's for the wrong intention. Okay, now we have a middle case. Shachtan lishman v'zarak daman shlei lishman. Let's say it was slaughtered for the right intention, but the blood was sprinkled for the wrong intention. So it says halechem kadosh ve'ena kadosh. Different Rabbi. Rabbi says that the bread is sanctified, but it's not sanctified. What do you think? It's like somewhere in the middle. It's sanctified, but it's not sanctified. The Gemara is going to explain what this means. It's going to be
From the vote.
Machlekes Abai and Rava, what exactly this means. something like that. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Aimer, Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says that Leila min HaKadosh Yitzchak Lishman v'Yizrik Daman Lishman. He says that it needs to be slaughtered for the right intention and sprinkled for the right intention. Actually, what he really means to say is that it needs to be sprinkled for the right intention. Why does he say it needs to be slaughtered for the right intention? I guess so the sacrifice doesn't get messed up. But what sanctifies the bread, according to him, is the sprinkling of the blood. Do you want to text Eily?
Yeah, I'm doing that right now.
Just tell him, because he asked me before, the light's on. I said yes. And then they went off. So.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
you sit here and the lights will be good.
Uh-huh.
Light from the car's
You can
pretty
wire
good.
this way.
Let's see what we
Right here,
can...
you can see perfect.
Oh, yeah? From the shield light over there?
This light, yeah.
Okay. Let's see what happens. It's getting lighter now, so... Okay. Okay, so we learned Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon's opinion, and we know Rabbi's opinion. Rabbi's opinion is that the Shechita does it, and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon's opinion is the Zrika does it. When I say does it, it's referring to sanctifying the bread, the two breads on Shavuos. The question is, the sheep, the Shechita of the sheep. The question is, what happens if the Shechita was Lishma, according to Rabbi, but the Zrika not? The Rabbi says it's a Kaddish vein a Kaddish. My time of the Rabbi, what's the reason of Rabbi? The Ksiv, it's written regarding a Nazir. In the Riyam, you should do as a sacrifice, a peace offering to Hashem, over the basket of matzahs, L'meimra. This says, the Shechita Mekadsha. Rabbi's using the word Zevach. Zevach means a sacrifice, but it also means slaughtering. He says it's the slaughtering that sanctifies it. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, Yaseh. It doesn't say just Zevach. It says also Yaseh Zevach. It says Yaseh. Yaseh means to do all of the activities of the sacrifice. And there's 4 activities of the sacrifice. There's the slaughtering, there's the there's the walking of the blood, there's the receiving the blood, the walking the blood up to the altar, and then there's the sprinkling of the blood. So Ach Yaseh Kol Asiyoseh. For Rabbi Nami Aksiv Yaseh. But Rabbi also says Yaseh. He says that you only need Shechita. What does he do with Yaseh? Yaseh means it's a general term. You should do. Iksiv Zevach Yaseh. Rabbi says, look, if it would be Zevach Yaseh, Zevach, slaughtering, you should do. Kiddush Amrit, then you'd be right. Hashtag Iksiv Yaseh Zevach. But now it says it the opposite. It says you should do the slaughtering. B'ma Yaseh. What should you do it? Bezvicha. Now, it could be that what Rebbe's doing here is he's using the klal uprat rule. Yaseh is a klal, is a general term, and zevach is a prat. And ein b'chlal al masha b'frat. So we started with the general rule, then you say the specific, so it goes to this. It's only specific. It's the only thing I need is the shechita. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, haksiv zevach. Rabbi has a good point. It says Yaseh Zevach. It says you should do the slaughtering. That's the detail. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says he needs it for Likud Rabbi Yochanan, for a statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon is, of course, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's son. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Akol Moedim shetzarech she'yeh lechem b'shas shechita. Everyone agrees that the bread needs to be there at the time of the shechita. Okay. Why did the bread need to be there by the shechita? But even though the shechita doesn't sanctify it, the zvicha, the zvicha doesn't sanctify it, the shechita doesn't sanctify it, but the zrika, the sprinkling, sanctifies it. But he agrees that it needs to be there at the time of the shechita.
But didn't yesterday we learn that the bread goes missing and shechita is still shechita?
Ah. The bread, no. We learned the opposite. We learned that once, even though there's a machlekes, Rabbi Kivan ben Nanas, regarding if the bread is dependent on the sheep, or the sheep are dependent on the bread, but everyone agrees that they become dependent on each other after the shechita. The shechita huzkuku, they become one unit. Okay. My kaddish ve'ena kaddish. What does it mean that it's holy but it's not holy? We said if it was slaughtered for the right intention, but it was sprinkled for the wrong intention. So Abaya Amar Kaddish Ve'ena Gomer. Abaya says that it's Kaddish, but it's not completely Kaddish. Rav Amar Kaddish Ve'ena Niter. Rav says no, it is completely Kaddish, but it's not permissible to eat.
It means Kaddish, but it's not completely. What's the mind after you know?
Ah, my benayu. Both of them you can't eat. According to Abaya and according to Rabbi, you can't eat the bread. Because, look, the bread belongs to the Bais of Migdash. That, of course it belongs to the Bais. You can't eat it. If it's a sacrifice and it became permissible, then you eat it. But if that didn't happen, so then it's stuck in the middle of being sanctified but not becoming permissible. And both Abaya says it's partially sanctified, and Rava says it's totally sanctified, but it's not permissible. So both of them, you can't eat it. So what's the difference? What happens if you try to redeem it? Okay. If you try to redeem it, then there's two versions of the text, what's going to follow. We're going to have to explain what Abaya would hold and what Rava would hold. Rashi starts off saying the text that we have, and he tries to explain it. He says, La Abaya, that it's not completely sanctified, leitafis pidyainai, which means the money that you use to redeem these two breads do not become like the two breads, and you can use this money for any sacrifice. Leitafis pidyainai. You could use this money for any sacrifice. However, l'Rava, tafis pidyainai. According to Rava, that it's so sanctified. It's so sanctified that the money that you use becomes, to redeem it, becomes like the two bread. And the two bread go out. Rashi says that this is impossible to be the pshat, because of Gemara Pesachim. You can never redeem a carbon mincha. You can't make it that was so holy, it's already holy, that now it goes out to being mundane. That's impossible. It changes the whole pshat. It changes the wording of the text. Exactly the opposite. Now, it goes like this. I'm going to tell you the way that Rashi has it in his second interpretation. And when he concludes, he says, everything that I said before, in my first interpretation, is just a waste. It's shibush, it's a mistake, and it goes like this. According to Abaya, tafis pidyainai. Abaya says that we're talking about the bread, the two breads on Shavuos, that the sacrifice, the two sacrifices that come along with it are slaughtered for the right intention, but they're sprinkled for the wrong intention. So we said that the bread is holy, but it's not holy. So what does that mean? Rabbi says it's not completely holy. And the Rava says it's completely holy, but it's not permissible to eat. So what's the difference? We said the difference is when you want to redeem it. Rabbi says that when you redeem it, because it's not completely holy, how holy is it? It's Kedushas Damim. It only belongs to the temple. It's called Kedushas Halishka, or it's Kedushas Damim. It's not a sacrifice holiness. It's a holiness of the temple. So he says that goes on to the money. The money becomes holy. Rava says the money, leitafis pidyainai, the money doesn't become holy. I'm not talking about does the breads go out to becoming mundane. That's not what we mean. Does the tafas, does the grabbing go on to the money? According to Rava, it doesn't even go on to the money. Why? Because we're dealing with the sacrifice. Do we need the lights? Do we need the car lights?
I think we're good.
We're probably good.
Yeah.
What's our gap?
Seven
We have. Yeah, we need the light, the parking lights on until 7.
o'clock.
We'll tell them to.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get rid of this. What do you do for Shmini Atzeres?
Gemara says, Bishleim Rava. Hainu Dika Bein Rabbi Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. If we go according to Rava, then we understand the difference between Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. Rabbi held that the Shechita sanctifies it, and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon held the Zrika sanctifies it. And according to Rava, it doesn't become according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, if it was sprinkled Shalei Lishma, then there's no holiness here. And according to Rava, there is a holiness here. And according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, the breads only have a kedushas damen.
Thank you, Rabbi Rosenberg.
Thank you.
Bring the light to the world.
According to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, the breads only have a temple holiness. And according to Rabbi, according to Rava, the breads have a full holiness. So therefore, when it comes to redeeming them, according to Rava, it cannot be redeemed at all. The money doesn't even become sanctified. According to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, the money would become sanctified. So we see a difference between Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. See, Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon have an argument here. Rava and Abai are explaining Rabbi's opinion. But if they're going to explain it in a way that there's going to be no argument, then they're messing it up, because we know that they're disagreeing. So according to Rava, we understand how they're disagreeing. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says that it's not holy enough and therefore the money gets the redemption, gets that holiness, temple holiness. And according to Rabbi, it's too holy and there's nothing goes back onto the money. However, according to Abaya, that he also says, Abaya says that it's not sanctified so much. It's Kaddish Ve'ena Gomer. It's not totally sanctified. In both of them, the money the money does get the redemption. So both Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon are going to hold the same thing.
But this guy goes to do his karban, and someone had the wrong sauce along the way, and now the breads are holy but not holy. Okay, so what does he do with his karban? He proceeds to follow together to do it all over again. That's what we really care about. We're not worried about who's going to redeem the challahs.
No, but we're asking. They stated that there's a status over here.
Right. So now that it's kaddish,
right.
but ain't
I
kaddish,
follow. The big question is a little
different.
different.
What does he do with his karban? That's the
Right.
bigger question. We're not.
Right. It's a community sacrifice.
It's bread.
They have to
Get
go
bread
back.
at the bakery. No one needs to redeem their bread. It's not the end of the world. That's not a real concern.
Okay.
Have a barbecue.
So Mayaka Bein Rabbi Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. The Gemara says Ikabinai lefsulu b'yotzi. The difference is, what happens if the breads are taken out of the temple?
Now you consider it real.
So, do they become puzzle because they went out? If they, according to Abaya, they were never a sacrifice, really.
So then it's hektish. You have no reason, you have no right to touch it.
No,
Take it.
I'm saying it's wrong. According to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, they were never sanctified yet, because according to Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, they're never sanctified because the Zrika wasn't done properly, so they were never sanctified. So these breads are fine, even though they went out the temple. When you bring the new sacrifices, these breads are perfectly fine. According to Rabbi, according to Abaya, it's not that. Even though if you try to redeem them, they will get the money will get the redemption. But if you try to take them out of the temple, they'll become puzzle. Okay. I hear what you're saying. It's not a big deal.
No, it's not. But it is a little bit of a big deal because you're dealing with hektish, and how you have to deal with hektish property. So hold on to halachas, but we're not even addressing the bigger issue, which is what happens to the karban itself. So that's what I'm asking. Okay,
What happens to the karban?
As relates to the karban itself, what's the difference between being there's kaddish, there's puzzle, and then there's kaddish for ain't kaddish? Okay, so as relates to the karban, What does Kaddish and Kaddish have to do with anything?
Right. When it comes to the carbon, when it comes to this major aspect that you're discussing, we need to bring new sacrifices.
So then Kaddish and Kaddish is the same as possible.
Yeah, but there's a difference here. Just because you need to bring new sacrifices, that doesn't mean that these sacrifices are not eaten.
Okay,
See,
someone can
we
make a
didn't
barbecue off to the left.
Right.
That's
Right.
fine.
Sonny's
On the
barbecue.
contrary, you have to. You can't just kill an animal for no reason.
Right.
Katz's barbecue.
Whatever it is.
Okay. You see, this was a very hard Gemara. Because of the two texts, it was very confusing, because you have to read the same thing twice, differently. This is a complex piece. We could have used the no lights as an excuse to not have gone through it. I can't see it. Was steht da? Okay, Boimene Reb Shmuel bar Reb Yitzchak mir Reb Chia bar Abba. We're not done. Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak has a question. He asked Reb Chia bar Abba. Kibsi atzer sheshachtan l'shman v'zark daman shlei l'shman. This sounds terribly familiar.
No, but the last case when we learned the situation, not when the person himself did it, but when the Kayan had the wrong intention. That's what we just did from that Gemara and this Gemara.
We did have Gemara about the person having the wrong intention. But in the
wasn't
past, yesterday's Gemara was the same issue. This is the Kayan that's offering. It's a community sacrifice. The Kayan that's offering the community sacrifice has the wrong intention. Okay. So the shechita is done properly, but the zrika is done improperly. What about the bread? Can you eat the bread? Now the animals you can eat. Because the rule is that any animal that's sacrificed for the wrong intention doesn't mean out of the allotted time. It's not piggle. Wrong intention means it was slaughtered for a different owner or for a different sacrifice. You can eat it. It's just the owner needs to bring another sacrifice. The Gemara asks Aliba de Man. Let's see what's going on here. Aliba de Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. If we're going to follow the opinion of Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, so Amar Zrika hi de Makacha. You didn't have a good zrika. It's not sanctified fully, and it's stuck in limbo. There's no way that you can eat this when it has the holiness of the temple, and it doesn't have the matir of being part of a carbon. It was never permitted. Yaliba de Rabbi. If you go according to Rabbi said that it was permitted by the shechita. But the zrika makes it that it's not perfectly, because the zrika, the sprinkling of the blood, wasn't done correctly, so it makes it in limbo. Kaddish ve'ena kaddish. So bein la'abaya bein la'rava, kaddish ve'ena niteru. Everyone holds that you can't eat it. Ela aliba de hai tana. We have another tana. The tani avua de Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, because the father of Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, I assume his name is Abba, he taught a brisa. Shtei halechem sheyatzu bein shchita lizrika.
It's interesting that it presented in that format.
Yeah. I think we have other cases like that. We have other scenarios where we say, when we call a person by his name, we call him by his name and his father's name. And we say, this person's father. Well, we said his name already. So he says, let's say you have the two breads. The shechita was done, but they were taken out of the temple in between the shechita, but before the zrika. V'zorak daman shel kvasim chutz lizmanim. Oh, this is so interesting. Now you have two problems. It's not in the temple,
Outside time.
and the blood gets sprinkled in a way that would make it piggle. But maybe because it's not there, this is like stepping outside when by Hagba, if the Sefer Torah falls, you're like, I wasn't in the shul. I don't have to fast, right? So these breads they're becoming piggle, which is pretty bad, but they're not there. So Rabbi Elazar Eimer, ein belechem mishum piggle. I'm explaining it that they're actually not there. It doesn't actually say that they're not there. It says that they went out. Possible that they were back in. We're not, right? The Gemara is going to get into that. So Rabbi Eliezer says the breads are fine. There's no piggle on them. Why? They're not, because they're puzzle anyway. They're not really fine. They were stepped out. when that happened. And Rabbi Kiva Amar Yesh Balechem Mishum Pigel. Rabbi Kiva says no, the breads are pigel. Even though they're, in other words, the effect that the sprinkling of the blood had goes even on the breads, even though they're not there, which makes it like it's really part of the sacrifice. If it makes it like it's really part of the sacrifice, then it could be that if the sacrifice could be eaten, if it's shalei lishman, not pigel, but if it was done in a different way, where the blood was sprinkled shalei lishman, maybe the breads could be eaten as well. As we see that they become pigel together with the sacrifice, even though they're not there, maybe they could become permissible to be eaten with the sacrifice. Amar Rav Sheshis, and Rav Sheshis explains that Hani Tanoi Rebbe Svirlu. These two Tanoim actually go according to Rebbe, Damar Shchita Mekadsha, that the breads became holy by the Shchita. So what is the Machlokes? Rabbi Eliezer goes according to his reasoning. Rabbi Eliezer is always Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. He goes according to his reasoning, that if you sprinkle the blood, it doesn't help for a sacrifice. That part of it went out. It doesn't go on that. Rabbi Kiva says no. If you do the sprinkling of the blood and part of the sacrifice is outside, the sprinkling is effective to the part that was not there. The Tanana was taught in a Mishnah. A muri kachim kalem, the limbs of a sacrifice that's of lesser holiness. Kachim kalem. Now the interesting thing is that the limbs, the inner organs, when they're brought on the altar, they actually have a status of kodesh kadashim, of being very holy, but only after the zrika. And another thing that happens is that there's really no me'ila on kachim kalem. Me'ila is if you have personal benefit from something that belongs to the temple. Kachim kalim are of lesser holiness, so that law doesn't apply until the zrika, and then that law applies to the emurim that are meant to be offered on the altar. You can't have benefit from them. So what happens to the emuri kachim kalim, these organs of the sacrifice, sheyatzu lefnei zrika stamim, that they left the temple before the critical service was done, before the sprinkling of the blood. Rabbi Eliezer says the sprinkling of the blood was not effective on them, and they're back where they were beforehand, the same place. And there was no matir on them, so there's no pigel and there's no nicer and there's no tamei. All the rules of that would apply to a sacrifice. Rabbi Kiva says no. Sprinkling was effective on them, and you are chayiv for pigel if they're sprinkled for the wrong intention out of the allotted time and all of that, even though they were not in the temple when the blood was sprinkled. Is it not? Midazrikas pigel kaval alechem bepigel biyotzei kebasar. Zrikas shleil shmei nami shayalei alechem. Let's say like this. Just like we said before, that the breads, according to Rabbi Akiva, the breads become pigel if they left. And the blood was sprinkled out of its allotted, sprinkled with intention for do a service out of its the appropriate time. So even though the breads were not in the right place, and the breads are not actually part of the sacrifice, but nevertheless, according to Rabbi Akiva, the blood that's sprinkled has an effect on the breads, which means that the breads are joined in to the animal itself, and as if it's one entity and it's one sacrifice. So too, we should say the same thing, that if you sprinkle the blood for the wrong intention, not out of the allotted time, but just for a different sacrifice, so we should say that just like the breads become pigel, we should say that the breads should also be allowed to be eaten just like they're part of the sacrifice. Because the way we're explaining it here is that why do the breads become pigel if it's sprinkled for the wrong intention? Because they become one with the sacrifice. So let's explain that as well, that if the blood is sprinkled, the breads should become permissible. Oy Dilma, or maybe we should say, l'chumra amrinan, l'kula lay amrinan. We only said this, l'chumra, to say that it has a status of pigel, But to say that it becomes permissible to be eaten, that we don't say. To say that it becomes one with the sacrifice, we'll say that just for stringency. But do we say that 100%? Definitely, that we can even be lenient and now eat the breads because the blood was sprinkled. Okay.
Aren't the breads hektish?
Yeah. Breads are hektish.
So the only way you
But
should
there's
be
a
able to-
matter.
Right, the only matter is the fact that you brought the carbon and the carbon was successful.
Right. Now, if the carbon was brought, but it was brought for the wrong intention,
Wasn't
that's
successful.
that's considered that the carbon is kosher.
You're gonna have to
But you have
redo
to
the
bring
carbon.
another one because of a vow,
Right.
because you didn't fulfill the vow, or you didn't fulfill the obligation of
Right.
whatever was you needed to do.
For example.
So,
So you
by
shouldn't,
a
be allowed,
chatas-
you shouldn't be allowed to take the bread
Doesn't work.
until you have fulfilled your obligation
No.
regarding the carbon.
Okay, so that's the discussion here. The carbon itself could be eaten, even if I didn't fulfill the
Yeah, but it's being
obligation.
eaten as a barbecue. It's not being eaten as a carbon.
Well, it's being eaten as the other carbon. It's being eaten as a carbon. It's not just a bar. It's eaten as a carbon, but I still didn't fulfill the obligation.
Okay.
So the question is, do the breads go under that status, under that category? That they get eaten as a carbon, even though we needed to... It's interesting because the breads would only be there if this is the actual carbon.
Right,
An animal
exactly.
could have been any
Exactly.
carbon.
Exactly.
You see, very few karbanos have breads. There's only three. There's the shtei alechem, there's the nazir, brings breads with his ram, and then there's the karban taida, the Thanksgiving offering. Those are the only three. So he could have brought it for any sacrifice, and he would be eating the animal as whatever sacrifice he brought it as, a shlamim or naila. Well, Eily maybe he wouldn't be eating it, but the bread. How did the breads get in there? But we're saying over here, according to this opinion, that the breads would go under that status because it was just like another organ of the animal.
Besides the three sacrifices that require bread.
There's only those three, and here we have one of them. And it's being offered, the sacrifice is being offered for a different sacrifice. And the question is, can we eat the bread? Even though you can eat the sacrifice, would the bread go under that other status? So Maskefla Rav Papa. Rav Papa has a question on the way Rav Sheshis explained this. Rav Sheshis explained this, that it has to do with, can we sprinkle the blood, and can we have an effect on the parts of the animal that are outside the temple? That's the way Rabbi Sheshes explained it. So Papa asks, Mimai?
Went is in Zvachim, no?
Yeah. Daf Tzadik. It says it on the side. Mimai dechi yisnu avroi pligi. How do you know that they're arguing when it's outside the temple? Dilma bidisnu avroi.